My name is Nathan Kimmons, and today I'll be reading The Son of a Lighthouse Keeper from the Sad Icelandic Fairy Tales by Steingrimur Gudmundsson. It's available on the Amazon store, and I'll be reading today from my Kindle Paperwhite. The Son of a Lighthouse Keeper. Tim was the son of a lighthouse keeper. He was an only child, but there were rumors that his father, Carl, had 2 daughters in another county. Daughters he had never supported. Daughters he had hardly ever seen. Still, he bragged about them to his son when in a good mood, which was very seldom. He knew his daughters were doing well and lived comfortably. This made him proud for some reason. It was no thanks to him, though. Tim never knew his mother, and no one seemed to know anything about her. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. If he asked his father about her, Carl would lift his evil cane. No one was willing to talk about her at all. Everyone remained as silent as a grave. The lighthouse was located on a high, rocky island with steep cliffs on every side. Beneath the cliffs were picturesque black sandy beaches. They stretched for a long distance on the coastline. Tim often walked the beaches collecting items that might be of value, like glass fishing floats, timber, and big plastic containers. A lot of this came from passing ships. Sometimes plastic was literally everywhere on the beach. Plastic keyboards, plastic framed computer monitors, plastic computer mice, plastic bottles. The amount of plastic he encountered had no end. It made him very sad to see his wonderful beach covered with all this trash. Plastic is an epidemic, he thought. People throw all kinds of things into the ocean with no respect for it. Plastic in the ocean breaks down into such small segments that pieces of plastic from a single 1-liter bottle could end up on every mile of beach throughout the entire world. Terrible. He always cleaned up as much as he could, but his father did not like this cleaning nonsense, so he did it in secret. Frequently, he discovered bottles with messages in them. Some of these had addresses on them. He tried to write to his bottle friends, but his father would never mail the postcards. Travelers often came to experience the beauty of the lighthouse island and its beaches. Sometimes, without thinking, they drove their cars into the loose sand and got stuck. Above, on the edge of the cliff, the lighthouse stood strong, laughing at them, or so it seemed to Tim. The travelers usually asked the lighthouse family for help. This was a great joy for Tim, as he loved helping the ignorant sightseers. It was nice to be needed and appreciated. He liked meeting people from a different time zone. They would give him candy and foreign currency for his help. His father hated this nonsense and tried to ignore the travelers, but with no success, for Tim always found a way to communicate with them. On windy days, the sea would encircle the island, flooding the causeway leading to it. On such days, after a storm lasting several days, the isolation was complete. Then the island was out of contact with this outside world. This, common during the winter, was something one had to get used to living in such a location. What saved him from total madness during these lonely times were books. Tim suffered from being the only child on the island. He never had any playmates. All he had was his father, and his father was a peculiar fellow, as you're about to find out. Tim's father had a brother, Stephen, and on their parents' death, these brothers divided the family farm according to their parents' will. Both brothers wanted the whole estate, and both desired the lighthouse keeper position. But the will required that they share the house. Stephen got the cows, while Carl got the keeper job. The sheep were divided into 2 herds, and they each got 1 horse. When they painted the house, each brother used his own colors on his half, each selecting his own basic color and a trim color. As a result, the house was 4 different colors, striped in red, blue, green, and white. It looked like it was made of a children's colored building blocks. They never spoke to each other after the split. The only communication, if you could call it that, was when Stephen, sitting on his old wooden bed during one of his frequent drinking periods, would mumble curses all night long at his brother. Things like, "Up yours, asshole," and "Wipe your ass, shithead," and "Shit in your pants, moron." He would repeat these things over and over in different voices, sometimes for a whole night, depending on how drunk he was. The farmhouse was about half a kilometer from the lighthouse and was divided into 2 households. The other human sharing the farm with Carl and his brother Stephen was an old wacko crone by the name of Lily. Lily worked for Stephen, and everyone knew her as Madame Cat, for she kept 11 cats. These were 11 crazy cats that no one could come near. If anyone got too close, they hissed and came at you with all the vigorous, freaky cat movement they could muster. They were so high-strung that they would often vomit all over the place. This frequently happened in Carl's kitchen. The brothers had separate kitchens. And when this occurred, Carl took clean towels from Madame Cat's kitchen and wiped up the vomit with it. He would shout out, "You should not stuff these damned animals with all this food." This made Madame Cat furious, and she would scream threats all day, such as, "I will kill all of your dogs, you fucking idiot. I will cut your ears off. I will cut off your nose." One might get terrified seeing Madame Cat screaming like that, for she surely looked like a witch in her ragged, sleeveless blue robe, her black hair sticking out in all directions. And if she also took out her false teeth, it would make your hair stand on end. Madame Cat had a boyfriend. At least he was some kind of friend. He was called Orman of the Fields. He had been raised on a farm called the Fields. He was a man of the country, a typical farm boy, except he wasn't. He was a foster son, and no one knew where he came from. Some said his father was a foreigner. He drove an old Chevy pickup, the love of his life. He always wore a black leather jacket. He kept his long brown hair cut in a ducktail fashion. The handfuls of Vaseline he put on it made it look much darker than it was. And he wore long sideburns. He was a shy, peaceful man, but changed rapidly when alcohol entered his body. Then Orman of the Fields became a true monster. One evening, he came to visit Madame, heavily intoxicated. He arrived with 2 of his friends, Paul and Dave, who worked with him rebuilding cars. Over the years, they had rebuilt a number of classic trucks in their small 2-car garage. Upon arrival, Orman began the visit by throwing bottles at the house, smashing some of the windows of the farmhouse. His friends had passed out in his Chevy. They had too much to drink after a celebration from selling an old renovated Chevy from the 40s. They missed all the fun. Orman entered the farmhouse and started smashing things in the kitchen. By this time, Madame Cat had run upstairs to her room with her cats and locked her door. The brothers heard the noise and came running in time to see the utterly deranged Orman smashing their dishes and their fine porcelain. The brothers acted quickly, working together this time, making this a very rare occasion indeed. They jumped on Orman, tied him down, and tightly taped his hands and legs. They taped his mouth too, for Orman was screaming like a lunatic. Then they put him in a canvas bag and closed it with a rope. Ormond went bananas in the bag trying to get loose. By the time the police arrived an hour later, the bag was still. Ormond had passed out. Carl had 6 dogs in his name. They were totally useless dogs, not even good as sheepdogs, or anything else for that matter. They were neglected most of the time and struggled to survive. Their nourishment was mainly trash, leftovers and rotten potatoes, some fruit peelings, even cans and some bones. Sometimes they were so hungry that they would eat animal dung that had dried in the sun. The fields were divided in 2. When Carl mowed his part of the grass with his old tractor, he was usually totally smashed from drinking his horrible home brew. A brew that he loved, but that tasted like a mixture between diesel and sour milk. And he would sing out loudly, "My father was a lighthouse keeper, watch the waves getting steeper, watch the ships going down, in Cadillacs they sailed with the tide." And he would scream and shout like a madman, "Give us the earth! Give us freedom! Give us some hay! Let there be light!" It was as if this kind of labor was to his liking and gave him some kind of kick in life. At least he felt alive, and his worries and dark mood would disappear for a while. His home brew helped a lot to achieve this. He used an ancient tractor, an Alice Chalmers, for the job. A tractor that belonged in a museum, but Stephen constantly fixed old machinery. He was a genius when it came to machines. He had a reputation as an excellent mechanic all over the region. He could fix anything. He was self-taught, had learned what he knew about mechanics by taking apart and putting back together engines of all sorts. He had a big work shed full of all kinds of tools. This was the fun in his life, fixing machines. Another strange problem at the Lighthouse farm was toilet facilities. There had never been an inside restroom at the farm, only an outhouse. And after the brothers took over the farm, no one would use it except for Tim. Tim never understood where the others went to relieve themselves. It would always remain a mystery that he never solved. Before the development of clearly defined ports, mariners were guided by fires built on hilltops. Since raising the fire would improve the visibility, placing the fire on the platform became a practice that led to the development of the lighthouse. In antiquity, the lighthouse functioned more as an entrance marker to ports than as a warning signal for reefs and promontories, unlike many modern lighthouses. Carl and his son took care of the lighthouse. There were many things to attend to. It needed to be painted constantly, inside and out. The roof was old and had a tendency to leak. The old wooden floor was also falling apart and rather treacherous. The lighthouse had 4 floors, with bedrooms on 2 floors. Tim had a room on the 2nd floor and his father on the 3rd. They would often stay there, especially when they were cleaning the lighthouse light. It took most of a week to polish the big copper lamp with lots of thick glass lenses that needed to be polished thoroughly. This was a very demanding job. They always tried to plan this work from rainy days, when it would be difficult to do other work like collecting hay from the fields. Part of the island had meadows, where they collected hay for their sheep, or work like searching for lost sheep or improving their fences. They had 2 sheep barns. One was near the middle of the island, and the other near the shore just beneath the cave by the river. The cave was in the middle of a mountain. There was a steep path leading to it. This was the Forbidden Cave, a cave used for official gatherings centuries ago and believed to be used for executions of brutal criminals such as rapists, killers, and thieves. Carl had prohibited his son from ever entering the cave. saying it was an evil place. By adding that if Tim didn't obey, he would be caned. The engraved cane was an extra long, super strong, silver-plated walking cane made out of black beechwood. The cane, truly loved by its master, was an implement of punishment, a threatening shadow hanging over Tim most of his life. His father did not hesitate to use it if he felt dissatisfied with Tim's work. And that could be any day or any time, depending on what kind of mood his father was in. Once, Carl hit his son with that cane for dropping some paint on the workshed floor. A minor mistake. And once, he hit him for losing his cheap pocket knife. The keeper hit his son many times. This sometimes led to severe injury, and Tim would often have to stay in bed. He had severe wounds and ugly bruises all over his body and lost a lot of blood. No one nursed him. He took care of the wounds himself. He was used to that, though. Tim tried not to hate his father. He was the only thing the boy had in life. But often he wondered, what about my sisters? Who are they? Will I ever meet them? My wonderful sisters. They were in his dreams, dreams that kept him alive. In a lighthouse, the source of light is called the lamp, whether electric or fueled by oil, and the light is concentrated by the lens, or optic. Originally, the light was provided by open fires and later candles. The argand hollow wick lamp and parabolic reflector were introduced in the late 18th century. Whale oil was also used with wicks as the source of light. Kerosene became popular in the 1870s, then electricity and carbide, or acetylene gas, began replacing kerosene around the turn of the 20th century. Carbide was promoted by the Delaine light, which automatically lit the lamp at nightfall and extinguished it at dawn. On one cold winter night, they were staying at the lighthouse, and after a hard day's work of polishing the lamp, they had a supper of fresh fish from the ocean and homegrown potatoes. Tim noticed that his father seemed quite annoyed that night, so he said as little as possible. He knew that when his father was on edge, it was best to be silent. It was as if something was about to happen. He had seen this behavior in his father before. The howling wind beat its fist against the windows. The crashing sea was like a big black monster crawling around outside. Tim woke from a nightmarish dream, but it was neither the noise of the wind nor the sea that woke him up. He heard a strange thump. It was as if someone or something was walking up the stairs. These footsteps were not the light footsteps of his small-framed father. They were made by something big and heavy. Who was there? Who could it be walking in the lighthouse in the middle of the night in this weather? He did not dare to look in the corridor. Was it a troll? There were many stories about them, but Tim had never encountered one. Was this creature in the corridor going to kill his father? What was he to do? Should he run downstairs and get the gun? He heard someone enter his father's room on the top floor. He finally dared to enter the corridor. He listened. He heard voices, low-pitched, unclear voices. He tried to imagine the person behind the voice, with no result. It sounded as if there was some kind of negotiations going on, but he could not be sure. Was there a troll in his father's room? He decided to go back to sleep, but that was impossible. His heart was pumping like a race car. What was his father up to? He had heard that while trolls are human-like in form, they are inhumanly strong, huge, and ugly. Trolls are very often thought to be fearsome and cruel creatures, but, like elves, trolls most often treat people as they're treated, returning favor for favor and exacting vengeance if harmed. Trolls live in mountains, caves, and cliffs, especially bird cliffs. Like humans, they live together in social groups. They fish, cultivate land, and keep animals. They are very good at handicrafts and enjoy holding feasts. Every year, Tim and his father lost some sheep. Always the oldest sheep of the herd, but sometimes others too. Tim didn't understand why his father wasn't more upset about this, for he loved his sheep dearly, but he simply wasn't bothered by the disappearance. Tim was actually happy about this, for at least he wasn't blamed for it. He had enough on his plate as it was. His father knew all his sheep by name, and talked to them every time he went near any of them. "Come to Daddy. Daddy loves you. Hello, my darlings. Are you there?" He would say this, or something of the sort, in a funny voice that was unknown to Tim. His father would walk towards the sheep and embrace them. In Tim's eyes, all the sheep looked the same, except for the lead sheep. They always had a distinctive look, graceful and strong. They really stuck out from the others. The day after the strange event in the lighthouse, his father was in a good mood. It was as if he was waiting for something good to happen. And he was planning a trip inland to the sheep shed. Tim was never allowed to go with him on these trips. He begged his father to let him come with him, but Carl was determined. "I'm going alone to search for our lost sheep," he said. "You stay home, boy, and take care of everything while I'm gone." He smiled a little and added with a serious look, "That is a great responsibility. I trust you with everything. Be a good boy and work on cleaning the manure out of the sheepcote. That's a lot of work, as you know. We don't want to be behind now, right, son?" This was about the friendliest, most loving thing his father had ever said to him in his life. The boy was totally amazed. "I will only be gone for 2 days." 2 glorious days, Carl thought to himself. He was looking forward to what was coming his way. It had been a while now since he had been able to relax. His nerves were ragged and his thoughts distracted. So Carl packed some things and made himself some stew and sandwiches. In the work shed by the lighthouse, there was a locked room no one was allowed to come near. From it, Carl grabbed chains, ancient handcuffs, brand new leg irons, a sledgehammer, and an ancient iron torture mask. He also grabbed a scold's bridal mask for smaller faces. Most often, these items he had found in the cave, and he valued them a great deal. Slaves or escaped criminals suffered the punishment prescribed by the law. They had to wear the heavy iron mask. By the same token, a slave who dared to speak or tried to bite his master was doomed to wear the iron mask for the rest of their life. So the lighthouse keeper jumped in his old Willis Jeep, whistling a tune, and drove away. Tim saw him leave and was very curious. Why this good mood? What was he up to? Who had visited him the night before in the storm? The curiosity was just too much. Tim decided he was going to follow his father. He had to know what was going on. He couldn't live without knowing. He needed answers. He would use the horse for the trip. He wasn't worried about the others on the farm. Madame was tending to her cats, and Stephen tending to his endless machinery, high on his brew. They didn't care about what he was doing. So, a few hours after his father left, he saddled the horse, dressed warmly, and left the lighthouse down the steep road from the island. On the way, the landscape was almost like from a fairy tale. Countless rocks and endless shapes, beautiful green hills, dotted with small trees. He wished he was going somewhere else, instead of spying on his father. A trip to find answers regarding his mother. A trip to see his sisters. a ride to town where he had only been a few times, or a journey to the unknown, anywhere else. Why was he doing this? He did not love or respect his father. Did he care at all what he was up to? Yes, he had to find out what was going on. At the end of the island, the road was surrounded by sandy beaches on both sides. He stopped on the beach to water his horse. Nearby was their potato garden. His father said the best potatoes grow in sand. Tim picked a few potatoes and gave a few to his horse. His soul was troubled, his spirits low. He felt something unpleasant was about to occur, but there was no turning back now. Que sera, sera. He crossed the river without a problem, though this was the first time he had done it on his own. What a wonderful feeling to ride a horse across a river, but he was not enjoying it. As he neared his destination, he saw his father's jeep parked not far from the river, close to the sheep shed. Tim would have to ride along the river to get there, but that might too be dangerous. His father might see him. He realized he would have to leave the horse behind and go on foot. He left the horse in a small ravine behind the mountain where the cave was. He walked slowly, fully alert for any movement. It was getting dark, which was in his favor. The only movement was a few birds flying around, looking for a place to nest. He was glad he hadn't taken any of the dumb dogs with him. They would have spotted the lighthouse car near the river crossing and barked aggressively. They were not terribly smart, but then again, they were dogs. He stopped to listen when he came closer to the sheep shed. He thought he heard nothing, but on listening again could hear some rattling in the shed. Tim crept to the back of the shed. Now he heard voices, his father's voice, and the same strange voice from the windy night. The rattling continued, and he overheard laughter. His hands were shaking as he walked slowly along the wall of the shed towards the side, where he knew there was a little doorway. In fact, his whole body was trembling. When he reached the doorway, he would be able to see what was going on inside through the windows in the door. At least that was the plan. Bent over as low as he could get, Tim came to the door and slowly stood up and looked into the shed. The window was dirty and it was dark inside, so at first he didn't see much. But when his eyes adjusted to the light, he saw. And what he saw made him almost faint. It was repulsive and out of this world. There were 3 people inside, his father and 2 trolls. One big troll and another smaller female troll. The female troll had the Scold's bridal mask on. It was barely big enough for her head, and a veritable tide of blood poured from the wounds caused by the mask. The troll was chained both hand and foot, with chains hooked to the ceiling. His father was raping the troll like a madman, and the other troll assisted him. The enraged victim was screaming behind the mask, the chains rattling loudly. In one corner of the shed stood the terrorized missing sheep behind a little barrier. The assistant troll had the sledgehammer in his hand. Tim fell to the ground, paralyzed. He did not want to see more. He was afraid they might hear him, but with all the noise they were making, they didn't notice him. He ran from this brutal act as fast as he could, all the way to his horse. Since the dawn of time, man has been obsessed with 2 things: sex and devising new creative ways to hurt, maim, and kill one another, whether it be for punishment for crimes such as theft or adultery, for extracting information and or confessions, to force political or religious conversions, or just for kicks on a Friday night. Man has excelled in daydreaming up new and inventive methods and devices to aid in the torture of those who has been perceived as enemies or someone to hate and abuse. His father was a common rapist and a killer who Tim felt did not deserve to live. He never wanted to see him again. He knew his father was an ugly and agonized soul, but the fact that he was such an evil soul he had not suspected. He was ashamed to be the son of such a man. So, the son of a lighthouse keeper set out on a journey to the unknown. He never returned. The only thing he ever regretted was that he didn't go back and get the rifle and shoot his father.